Hello, thank you for downloading and taking a look at our webcast here with SAP and Bramasol, focused on the themes and topics we'll have in 2022 around revenue accounting and reporting. I am excited to have my friend and colleague here, Pete Graham from SAP. Pete, welcome.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
It's great to have you. I think this is our first recording of the year, so I'm excited to continue this. So,
It is.
welcome.
Yep, thanks.
So today we're going to focus in, folks, on help you understand what is it we're going to focus on this year. We'll introduce some themes, and then we're going to focus in on revenue accounting and management, really help you understand some of the core innovations around that this year. We'll give you a context for S/4HANA. We'll spend a lot of time and we'll dive into that subject. Intelligent finance, help you understand what intelligent finance is and what you can look forward to hearing more about from us. Of course, we'll be talking about the digital solutions economy, this incredible move from selling something as a box or selling perpetual licenses to really what we call the solutions economy, moving something as a service, XASS, anything as a service. And then, of course, a favorite for Pete and I is comply, optimize, and transform. So with that, let's dive right in. Um, Pete, we're going to talk a little bit about RAR and automated revenue management. We'll talk about some of the features, roadmaps, and then you can talk about some other things. So, one of the questions that always comes up for me, and we know we talk about, is what the heck is automated revenue management in 2022, and what's happening?
Yeah, so automated revenue management is really the portfolio of solutions from SAP that cover revenue accounting and revenue recognition. And the term automated revenue management is used by a lot of analysts. In fact, there was just an analyst rating out by MGI, right, that used the term. And so anyway, just to try to be a little bit more consumable in terms of marketing
Mhm.
messaging, we decided just to actually start to message or position our solutions like the market already is. So that's why we now have this kind of umbrella of automated revenue management, and there's several solutions under that. On the private cloud, it's SAP Revenue Accounting Reporting, or RAR. On the public cloud, it's event-based revenue recognition. Those are the two main ones, though there are some nuances, like event-based revenue recognition can also work in the private cloud, as well as the
Mhm.
public cloud can also work contract-based revenue recognition. But that's what this is all about, just really about just a little bit of positioning, right? And the solution, the space is very broad and diverse. As you can see here, we've got customers running literally, I got one customer that's rolling out and they're going to, literally do about 400 contracts a year. And I got another customer that's doing 100 million contracts a month, right? So there's a huge diversity here that we
Absolutely.
see across the spectrum.
Yeah, and we're the same, as one of the key partners who works with you and SAP on implementing this, exactly the same. We've got some that have some very simple, straightforward, um, like one of our clients, Vivint. It's a very straightforward scenario in which all they do is they sell home security and home systems, and they have very straightforward scenarios. It's very easy for them. But the power that they need is the ability to do contract modifications and updates because they allow their customers. So it kind of fits that left-hand side as opposed
Hmm.
to the far right, as you know. We've been working with you on a number of these large customers, telcos in
Hmm.
particular, but some of the large volume software companies and hardware companies that have extremely high volume and highly complex. Hewlett Packard comes to mind, but others, Google and OpenText and many others who fit that kind of right-hand side of the screen. So the beauty of RAR, I think, is its flexibility and scalability, right?
Yeah, especially on S/4HANA Finance, and with some of the improvements that are available on there on that platform via
Mhm.
the optimized contract management module, which is
Excellent.
part of RAR as well. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
really made
great.
to scale. So
Yeah. All right. So, and you'll see some more about this in the future in future webinars and webcasts. We'll dive into, particularly, you'll hear us talk about this idea of volume, velocity, density, and complexity, and you'll see the interaction of RAR. the beauty of how RAR fits in an ecosystem. And I think that's the other thing I really love about the RAR solution, Pete, is it's designed to fit in an ecosystem regardless of the inputs and outputs. It can take information from a lot of different places, whether you have SAP, sales and distribution, CPQ, BRIM, which is a huge topic that we'll talk about, and then feed it out into a variety of different ways in the general ledger, right? So.
Right. So I think you bring up great points. I mean, revenue accounting reporting can fit right in hybrid landscapes. It was always made to be able to bring in data from hybrid landscapes or disparate systems, right? We worked early on with the telcos. They have lots of different billing systems and input systems. Some of our telcos are using 17 different data feeds, right?
Yep.
And so that's built in, and that's very useful for many customers.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing the scalability, the digital core, right? The real-time nature, all this, and we see it with the switch to these new subscription business models. Everything's much more granular, much more real time, but the architecture's there already, right?
Absolutely.
This is what we've been working on for a number of years.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a great journey. And speaking of a great journey, let's talk a little bit about the product itself. And maybe I know you have to tuck on the favorite stuff we always love to have, the legal
Yeah, this is a
disclaimer.
disclaimer, right? I mean, this is stuff we're going to talk about is subject to change. So most of this stuff is already out, but the stuff that we're working on for 2022 is not out yet. So if we go to the next slide, we can see we've delivered improvements in 2020 and 2021 around the 2020 side was really around on the inbound side. So once we had the RAR move to S4, we really started to focus on the digital core and real-time nature. And so the inbound processing was optimized. There was a new contract object introduced, optimized contract management, so that we could really scale better and handle more complexity, especially for highly dense contracts with thousands and thousands of performance obligations. And other things like embedded analytics and the new Fiori, right? So all that stuff started popping up in 2020. And then in 2021, we kind of finished that work in the sense of not only the inbound side, but the outbound side, improved some of the postings to the Universal Journal for better, not only real-time decision making, but I should say real-time throughput, but also the
Right.
decision making. And there's also some plugins that we added for SAP Financial Compliance Management, which some customers like. So that's kind of a quick summary of what was delivered over the last couple years, 2020 and OP 2021. And now we're starting to work on things around predictive accounting. There's always new scenarios that pop up. So development's trying to add particular ones that seem to be the most requested, and also for scenarios related to margin analysis for asset-centric service industries. So hopefully we'll get some more definition from our product team shortly, perhaps at the user group later this month. And then, as always, we'll keep folks updated throughout the year. And that's just another comment, right? Through this year, John, we've been thinking about, what will we do throughout the year in terms of communicating what's important. Certainly the roadmap information important, but, we'll have certain themes, right, around different things like digital solutions economy and the core and RevRec. And anyway, those themes will be present throughout, different sessions or different blogs, and different pieces of content get rolled out. So hopefully, the customers, and we do have a variety of customers with different interests. Hopefully that will allow the customers with these different interests to stay up to date, right, on that information.
Yeah, and I know that the margin analysis in particular and profitability are big for a number of our customers that we've been talking with recently, who are really trying to understand a cost plus environment, or how profitability relates to that revenue recognition, because they have to understand profitability at a business level. And I think the unique and interesting thing that revenue accounting does for you, and in particular RAR's capability of showing you all of that through the automated allocations, is insights, right? And the insight to action. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that further along, but it's that analytics that's so crucial. And one of the powers, of course, of RAR married together with S4HANA is that powerful analytics capability. So,
Yes. Yep. And I think, we see that too in handling the digital solutions economy or anything as a service, right? These are new business models that get
yeah,
implemented. Um, S4HANA really has this intelligence piece that allows you to quickly implement all the pieces, the modules to operationalize it, right? The order, the quote, the order, the invoice, the
yeah.
fulfillment, all that tracking, and then the rev rec and finance and
Mhm.
analytics are all done in parallel, almost in the background. So it's a very
Yeah.
good combination. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, Pete, we have a large, to mention that, we have a large telco that we're working with now, whose goal it is to reduce the time it takes them to put offers into the marketplace, test them, and understand the revenue implications for that. They want to reduce it from months to weeks. So they're going a 75% or a 4x increase in speed. And it's only possible because of the flexibility of tools like RAR to adjust to that and scale. So, we're looking forward to that. And we should have some good customer stories as that one rolls out.
All right,
So
sounds good.
we
Yep.
talked about S4HANA and the power of S4HANA, the single source of the truth. We talked about the universal journal. Maybe you can touch a little bit on why is that so important here?
Well, I think if you go back to the origins of the Universal Journal, right, the in-memory technology, if you look at the older generation ERP systems, they had lots of tables spread across, the solution. And so there was lots of batch processing. And so when the in-memory technology came out, the idea was let's put all this in one table, and that's essentially what they were able to do with Universal Journal.
Yeah,
So now you can get all of that in-memory technology, right? All of that financial information now can sit in one place. It's called Universal Journal. And what that means is you basically have transactional characteristics and analytical characteristics all in one place. So you can see all the transactions in the Universal Journal, but you can now also see the analytics. And so it really is that single source of truth, right? Where you can very quickly
right.
um, get to all the details that you need. And definitely when the original version of RAR was an add-on and they had a you know um, because of some of the ways they managed it, it was in a subledger, but they've now kind of re-architected that piece again, really improved it with the optimized contract management, and
Yep.
now with the real-time kind of posting improvements that they made in OP 2021, you now have this single source of truth, real-time embedded analytics. So it's really a very capable, set of features that your average accountant can have access to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the fact that it's all connected, when we think of universal journal, it really is universal. All of the master data, all of the pricing plans, the billing plans, all of the aspects that might come from BRIM in terms of subscriptions and information regarding ratables and charging and all of that now comes out of the same set of information. It's one database, one place that you can go for all of that, and it ties together. And I think that's a great um, just tremendously powerful tool for companies that need it. Um, we talk about volume. One of the things that you and I have been talking about over the past few months and past year or so is this idea of volume, velocity, density, and complexity. And you had it, it was up in our original slide there, but it's something we're going to focus on this year as a theme because it really drives the way you can approach different customers and different scenarios and different industries. And maybe you can talk a little bit about, your perspective on, why does that matter?
Yeah, so I think as customers are trying to figure out, what solution, what cloud options are best for them, there are, our best practice, you need your requirements and the fit gap, right? And so
Hmm.
this is really kind of a very high level fit gap where you have four dimensions, right? Volume, velocity, density. So, how much data you're trying to crunch, how quickly is it changing, is it real time or not, basically velocity side, density, um, really how thick is the contract, or how many performance obligations are, how dense,
Right.
right? If many customers only have a couple, you know, a dozen or two performance obligations, but we have other customers that can have thousands and thousands, right? And so
Right.
that's a much different problem to solve. And then the overall complexity, right, of those performance obligations, whether it's, simple contracts, simple modifications or
Yeah.
not. So those are kind of the levers or the stress points we see that if you can understand those, you can probably get a pretty good idea of kind of what cloud options to take, and
Yeah.
kind of where your potential pain points could be that you need to dig into and make sure you've got configured properly.
Yeah, and I think, we all get volume and velocity. I think one area that you and I have seen is this density and complexity.
Yep.
And density, as you so well said, I mean, that's all about how many POBs. But if you think of it as, for those who understand RAR and revenue accounting, and I'm sure that should be the audience who's listening here, is, density, how many, right? But they could
Yep.
all be event based, or they could all be simple
I have
POBs
to be
that are.
dense and complex. Yes, we've
Yeah,
had that
but
too.
then
Right.
complexity, right? It's the relationships and how many are nested, right? Or how many are linked. We have a couple of customers out there who not only have parent child, but parent child, grandchild, and great grandchild relationships. And how complex are they? And then we have a demo we did yesterday for a customer who had four different types, basically all four types of POBs, where they were time-based, event-based, percent of complete, and it just and the other ones were subscription usage-based, right? Consumption and usage-based. All of this adds this layer of complexity, and the good news is combining RAR, BRIM, and the other SAP solutions together, we can handle all of those different levels, right?
Yes. And I mean, the complexity just it keeps building, right? I mean, and that's what we've seen in this space is that as we've developed capabilities, customers have always figured out new ways to use them,
Yep.
increasing the complexity, right? So the complexity is just something that just keeps getting more and more complex, or it's getting
Yes,
bigger, right?
yep,
Complexity element seems to get bigger. And,
it does.
now we're seeing some time lags and other things when we look at
Yep.
the, scenarios in the digital solutions economy. And anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm
More to
not,
come on that. Lots more.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
And at the end of the day, this is a reporting tool and analytics. That's what it's all about. And I think you hinted at that. You guys, the team in Waldorf, and certainly Bramasol, we've done a lot to continue to improve the reporting and analytics for RAR. And certainly out of the Universal Journal and S4HANA, there's tremendous analytics that continue to evolve and become available, right?
Yeah, that's true. And so, I mean, I think the in-memory technology was a big paradigm shift, right? We went to S4,
Mhm.
and customers are still learning how to consume it, and
Yep.
we still see that today. And so there's still more, CSD views being rolled out, and customers
Right.
learning how to use it. But they're very capable in terms of the slicing and dicing and information that's being provided, and customers really find it valuable, right? Once they see it. So,
Absolutely. And it's the insight to action because they're all linked together. You can do something about it. And we find, by the way, when we take some of the reports, the powerful tools that are available through RAR and SAP, um, the customer will look at them as we're going through a process and say, wow, that's really cool. But what if I could do this too, right? And so that's just, we'll continue to see more of that evolution.
mhm.
Uh, So it wouldn't be an SAP conversation if we didn't say cloud, cloud, cloud at least three times, right? It used to be we would have to say HANA, HANA, HANA all the time. Now we say cloud, cloud, cloud. What is SAP and what do we see? What do we mean by cloud, Pete?
Well, I think from an SAP perspective, you've got several different offerings, right, related to cloud, right? We have private cloud and we have public cloud, right? So,
Hmm.
and potentially customers could combine those and have hybrid, right? Hybrid models.
Sure.
But really, we're trying to make sure that we offer the best capabilities for the different markets, right, that we serve, right? And again, in that spectrum that we saw for revenue recognition, again, the product that can help manage, potentially a customer with, 1,000 contracts a year may be different than the contract, may be different than the solution that helps customer with 100 million contracts a year, right?
Sure. Sure.
Um,
You know,
and so we're
and I,
just trying to
yeah,
make it consumable, right?
right.
And good fit. Yeah.
Yeah, and we hear this all the time about cloud itself, but as I think of other solutions that are out there, they claim they're cloud solutions, right? Um, but what SAP has done and what you're doing from an automated revenue management is ensuring that the quote unquote cloud solutions integrate properly. So many times we hear of customers who have implemented cloud solutions, quote unquote, or best in breed, quote unquote, solutions, yet they aren't because the interfaces or the changes that happen have so many downline impacts. And it's important that I think it's important that SAP does spend the time making sure that when they implement something in the cloud that it works, right?
Yeah.
So,
So I mean, certainly in the public cloud, I mean that solution is all interoperable and is built to work in a seamless way, right? With a lot of eliminations of batch processing, things like that. The private cloud has also worked that way. I would say it's probably a broader set of functionality,
mhm.
and so there are more options, right? Options
Yeah,
to
right.
look at in terms of configuring it. So
Sure. Great. All right. So the net of this is the idea, and you mentioned optimized contract management. Maybe we can spend a moment, but intelligent finance, lights out finance. We've heard this from your former colleague and now
mhm,
head of and Thack Brown loves to
mhm.
talk about lights out finance and our value proposition. Our value proposition is always be automation and simplification. What does all of this mean? What's this idea of S4 HANA lights out intelligent finance, Pete?
Well, again, if you look back at kind of the previous generation ERP, it had a lot of batch processes, right? And so
Hmm.
the first step to lights out finance is you want to automate as many things as you can. And of course, the best way to automate something is not have to do it anymore. So when you make that jump from S4, there are a lot of things you don't have to do anymore. And I remember that we had done, gosh, this is Sapphire a number of years ago when
Yep.
S4 was just coming out, and PwC helped us do kind of a benchmark between the kind of the older intercompany reconciliation and the S4, and the results were spectacular, right? I mean, under the old system you have batches, and on the new one, it essentially doesn't take any time. There's no because there's no batches.
Yep.
So really, it's this lights out finance is really the idea that I mean, you have it in other industries in terms of I think in manufacturing they call it one for one, but
Huh?
basically the idea like, hey, if I ship a widget, as soon as I ship it, my balance sheet is like the Excel pivot table. It just updates and everything's up to date. Or if I
Sure.
ship a car off the production line, everything's going to be updated. So
Right.
so that's with the automation and the analytics, that's all the real time
Okay.
um, nature. Now, if you add then the agility piece, right? I'm going to go through
Hmm.
mergers and acquisition. I'm going to have new business models due to pandemic. That adds another dimension that actually allows companies to respond,
Okay.
right? And so you'll hear, where finance is not, playing catch up, but finance is there saying, hey, we can help you enable this, business go for it. And then of course the assurance side in terms of, making sure you're enabling compliance and tracking things and have a good audit trail. I mean, those are all good things, best
Hmm.
practices that, companies can then make sure they're following, right? So all
Absolutely.
these things can kind of be combined or kind of come together. But certainly, when I think about lights out finance, I think of literally if I am the CFO or the office of the CFO, the system is doing kind of the bread and butter work automatically, um, allow me to exactly know where I stand all the time with respect to cash flow, balance sheet, and income statement. And then I can focus more on the analytical pieces and really adding value, right? About,
Sure.
where do we want to take the business next, or what are the challenges we need to adapt, right, or meet.
Right. And that certainly applies to RMM and the automation and simplification of revenue accounting. When we do demos and talk to customers, we of course we take the time to show them manually how the posting process, and in old RAR, it was a three-step posting process. Now OCM has improved that, and we'll talk about that. But um, that idea of it all happens in the background, just so exciting for some people. They love that idea. So speaking of OCM and OIP, optimized contract management and optimized inbound processing, we're going to spend some time later this month with the Waldorf team, the
Good,
developers,
good,
talking
yeah.
about those features, right? Um, but why does this matter to people?
So, um, it matters to people because these are capabilities that were built from the ground up to take advantage of the in-memory HANA technology and all of the experience we had with respect to revenue accounting and reporting in terms of, all the implementations we've done and how we could potentially do things
Mhm.
better, more efficiently, right? And scale better, all these different um, areas of improvement, right? And so that's all baked into these things. And so that's why it's important that customers realize that we didn't just introduce these just because it was the flavor of the month or the new
Right.
fashion. I mean, these were introduced because we had lessons learned, and we now had a technology that could make significant improvements, or even breakthroughs. And that's what we did, right? We spent time, and those are now here, and now customers can, take advantage of those benefits.
Absolutely. And like I said, check out, for those of you who are listening to this, we do have an upcoming webinar later this month in February. But for anybody who's listening to this later on, go check it out. You can download it from the website there. With that, we've been spending a lot of time talking about this thing, Pete, we call the digital
Yep.
solutions economy. Um, and I have this in here because I wanted to kind of frame it up and give people, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this, and it's a very busy slide, but it's very busy slide because um, it really talks about the new model for the way customers are engaging with their customers, our end customers, in a B2C model, and how customers want solutions that take them through the entire life cycle of their journey and allow them to jump in. And of course, the same is true for our customers. They may want to focus in on specific areas, but for the purposes of this webinar, maybe you can talk, Pete, about, what's the relevance of revenue accounting to all of these areas, and why is it so important that you be connecting the dots in these, and how does RAR help you do that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So, um, I think the first thing to think about is that we've had such a transformation in not only the systems but the business models. I mean, you think about anything as a service, and
Hmm.
it's kind of one of these things where um, it's been there, or if you look at the IT side, I mean, software as a service businesses have been out there for a long time. But what is very, I think, interesting is that in the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, all of a sudden this anything as service has gone to new levels, right? New heights. It's just kind of boomed and it's expanded everywhere. And now everybody's thinking about, well, how can I now take something that may have been buy a product and now make it a subscription, right? So now as soon as you start to go into that transformation, you need a system that is real time, is flexible, can scale, can handle the complexity. And those are all the things that we've been building the, the revenue recognition system for, you know, in in the private and public cloud. So, long story short, we've been, um, you know, I guess some of our forecasts were spot on, right? We've been thinking about
Yeah.
digital economies and the potential that these things could scale up. And I guess you're never quite sure um, when you might see these things happen, but it just happens. COVID seems to be accelerating, and now all these things are happening, and what we thought was going to happen has happened, and now we've got the tools to manage it.
Yeah.
And so that real-time nature then helps connect the glue, right? Because now that I'm offering services, potentially there's more parts of the organization that might be able to contribute to revenue, right? Or potentially be related to revenue. And so that's also an important aspect that if you have a system that can scale and be more granular and be more real time, can then handle
Yeah.
those new challenges.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think the other aspect that you um, hinted at, if you will, or intimated about, um, if you think of RAR, where's the place that all of this information comes together? Right? It could very well be that you have multiple different kinds of customers who have different rights to see and manage things. They create different bundles of materials. It could be a physical material, a subscription, a service. It could be a lot of different aspects. And then when and how do they then um, get them,
Yeah.
right? How do they get them? How are they entitled? And what are they entitled to get? All of that comes together and the invoicing and charging, right? We think of the rateability and the consumption models. And of course, one of the things you'll see this year is we'll talk individually about all of these components again and their relationships throughout the year. But where it all comes together is right here. If you look at revenue accounting, where does it come together? Where do we define who is the customer? How do you have to have that sense of who is the customer? Is it, we talk about principal versus agent, right, under 606. That relates right here. What are your bundles? How are you defining those bundles? How are you pricing them? Something we'll talk about this later this year also in more detail is standalone selling price. How do you create them? How does it relate back to that? When you fulfill, how do you fulfill? You talked about delays and transit delays for
Mhm.
physical products, but what about entitlements? When you take possession of it, just because I bought a package of software doesn't mean that I've activated all of the capabilities in that solution. It's when does the activation happen and take control of that activation that might drive when I can recognize revenue. Invoicing and charging, ratability, and usage-based models have huge impacts on things like variable consideration, for example, or holdbacks, or another topic we see a lot more and more of is rebates.
Mhm.
So, it all comes together. And that's the beauty of what I love in this model that you and I have worked on with the rest of the team is you can begin to get a picture of how it's all so intricately connected. But the other beauty of this model is you don't have to do it all at once. You can do pieces. If your issue and challenge is how do I create solutions, you can do that. If it's about entitlements, you can do that. If you just want to focus on, yeah, I've got my own individual solutions for this, but I really need a way to quickly do subscriptions and revenue accounting, use SAP subscription billing and RAR as a tool. So it's that flexibility, again, the scalability that is so important to what customers want. And of course, Pete, you talked about RISE. I think it wouldn't be an SAP conversation this year without talking about RISE and SAP's um, business transformation as a service, right? Look at that.
Yep.
Who knew you could buy business transformation as a service, right?
Yep.
So all of that I think is related, and we'll be spending a lot of time on this model. So let's talk about another one, comply, optimize, and transform. And you and I have been talking about COT, or comply, optimize, transform. Oh my gosh, for almost 5, 6 years now, I think was one of our first presentations at Sapphire or Insider where we
Yep.
talked about it. And comply really was starting with your baseline transactions and optimizing or creating transactional excellence, process excellence through optimization, optimizing those process, applying some basic tools, AI to a limited extent, or machine learning might fit in here as you begin to optimize, but then transformation. And really the results are in. Um, revenue accounting, that ship has sailed. And we know that a lot of companies have made investments and scrambled in many ways to comply. Um, but when they complied, they really just did it to comply. And now they're seeing the power of how a tool like RAR can help them with really optimizing those processes or improving. What are you seeing in that space, Pete?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think we're seeing kind of, the basic compliance seems to be done. We're now seeing customers that if they're coming to us, they might have an IFRS 15 or ISC 606 system in place, but they're really looking for a transformation, right? A big
Hmm.
change. So we really are seeing customers that either want to kind of make some minor to more than minor improvements, right, to transformations. And
Yeah,
especially if they're maybe on the add-on version of RAR and ERP and want to jump to S4, right, and take advantage of some of the new
absolutely.
capabilities like optimized contract management, or really these new business models that are forcing them, right, to look at something more flexible because now they're doing subscriptions, which they weren't doing before.
Exactly. Yeah, no, true. And this is true, by the way, let's talk for a moment. BRIM, that's a powerful portfolio of products, very similar to ARM, Automated Revenue Management. It's a portfolio of products. There's actually 8 in there, but they're really designed to help you manage and optimize order to cash. And by the way, somebody pointed out today that if you rejigger this, it's actually OTC, order to cash. Thought that was interesting. But SAP does bring the power. The BRIM brings the power of these digital solutions economy to bear as you begin to optimize and transform these businesses. And the fact that it's so well integrated to RAR is a huge thing, and I'm sure you're seeing a lot more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting that the history of Brim, right? It came out of the utility industry. And I think, I can remember the early days when people were talking about web services and now they're here
Yeah,
in a big way. But, literally, they, started just, they were, you know, software that utilities use to manage usage, right, and charging. And now all of a sudden that business model has expanded, and now people are measuring digital things or other monetary things. So it's just amazing how
yeah,
things can evolve. But definitely we're seeing that Brim is useful in so many different areas. And of course it has integration with revenue accounting reporting, which means a lot of times customers can look at their the billing, the marketing and billing side, and then also get a good
right.
look at the revenue side.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it plays so well into this model because, just like what we saw with revenue accounting, a lot of customers, they set up a subscription model because they knew they needed to move it, but they didn't think about the linkages, or didn't understand the implications. And as they began to look at it, they said, "Wow, this is just difficult. How do I integrate the information? How do I allow and give customers their own way of making their own modifications?" And some of the tools out there didn't do that. So certainly that integration is huge. Lease accounting, I thought you mentioned this, and it's a great, interesting little tidbit because of COVID, and also, by the way, in part because of revenue accounting. They postponed for private companies. Um, a lot of the public companies also have complied, quote unquote. And what we're starting to see is more and more of those companies really wanting to optimize, very similar
Yeah.
to what we saw in the revenue accounting space. But what is also interesting is the beginning emergence of lessor accounting, and lessor accounting again is particularly for revenue accounting. Lessor accounting is yet another version, if you will, in some ways, of a subscription model, and the ability to integrate those and do that is continuing to emerge, and I think we see more of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this is also related to the business models, the digital solutions economy, right? The anything
Right.
as a service, because one aspect of that is someone's the lessee, the other side's got to be the lessor, right? So
Exactly.
that lessor accounting is starting to pop up now. we had that big wave, when the standards were first introduced. So I'm not seeing that big wave anymore. It's pretty much a steady state, but definitely
Right.
because of this extension, potentially we're seeing that steady state, maybe a little stronger. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a good amount of customers in the sense of steady state interest. But I do think you're right in terms of, as these for each of these topics, right? Are they just complying? Or are they optimized? And I would say most of the trends are, the compliance phase is done. We're now looking at optimization or
Yeah.
transformation.
Yeah, and the same is true. I'll just do a little plug here for our friends in the treasury cash management space also, right? Same thing is true. Comply, optimize, transform. Everybody knows how to pay bills and collect cash, but with the need to preserve cash, certainly during this pandemic, has had huge implications on that. We're seeing that more and more brought together. So, oddly enough, or not oddly enough, interestingly enough, there are ties of all of these things together as you begin to look at the subscription economy and its impact on things like working capital or days sales outstanding or turn. All of that has been accelerated by the idea of subscriptions, whether you're using tools, um, like ACH, automated payments, or you're paying in advance, or you're using credit cards, or you're using other cryptocurrencies. All of this has had huge implications into, you know, an ecosystem that is designed to support more of these kinds of models. So we see this more and more as you see all four of these key areas beginning to coalesce together. So,
Mhm.
so with that, Pete, that's a great way of segueing into, and I want to thank you again for a great opportunity for us to talk.
That
I'm
was great.
excited
Thanks
for
for
this
joining.
year.
Thanks for allowing me to join and talk to you about this subject. It was good.
Yeah, and everybody look forward to. There's a lot more coming out there. Pete and I will be doing some more webcasts and podcasts on these specific subjects. I hope you enjoyed this little hint of what's to come this year. We hope you make it a great year, and thank you very much for joining.